Hello, I'm your host, David Newson, and welcome to Coded in Gold. This podcast explores the fractured, beautiful pieces of our modern life through compelling stories and conversations with exceptional individuals. Let's get started. This week, I sat down with Jasmine Martirossian. Jasmine is a fellow marketer, and despite running in the same circles for many years, this was the first time we sat down to chat. As you'll hear, we connected quickly. We share a love of travel, geek out on our personal philosophies around marketing and business, and discuss how being multilingual can radically transform the way you relate to the world around you. Without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Jasmine Martirossian. Well, welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your background. I know we kind of swim, or we're kind of in similar circles, like in marketing, but kind of.
Well, I think one of the things is, I think my background is multifaceted, and I've always practiced, you can't, how do I say this? I remember reading a book by Charles Handy, who actually pioneered the term portfolio career. And I think that resonated with me way back when. And I started making sure that I would not in any way become obsolete. So I'm always constantly trying to push myself to new things. As a result, I earned a PhD. For 4 years, I taught at Northeastern University, from courses like sociology of business to my favorite, social psychology. But then, I joke that, I gave myself to corporate prostitution. Not everybody. Because it's great to just have all the academic ideas, but I also like fast pace, accomplishing things. So that's totally. And so then I was fortunate to be able to transition. Very few actually are able to do that, into the side of market research, public relations. Actually, I was doing public relations while I was earning my degrees. I did not know it was a big deal at the time. I was doing special projects and writing content, and then went into PR for the CMO of Fidelity Investments institutional side, Stuart Brooks.
Wow.
And to this day, we're great friends. But again, I was very young and very not taking it too seriously, which I guess helps. But that was my foray into marketing.
What was the draw to social psychology?
Social psychology, fundamentally, if you look at the work of, a lot of people who have become very famous speakers now are writing books, like Malcolm Gladwell.
Sure.
What they're doing is they're recycling all the research done by social psychologists. The unfortunate part, those really talented social psychologists are horrible at self-marketing. Simon Sinek too. There's nothing really original that they do. They take what social psychologists have done, all that research, and which really is relevant for marketing. And social psychology fundamentally studies our individual behaviors within the context of our environment.
Yes. And so my thinking on this is, you must be familiar with human-centered design thinking, right? Where, step number one is developing deep empathy for, your target audience or the consumer, whoever it is that you're designing for. And that kind of strikes a chord with me. That's something that I love doing myself, is developing that deep empathy for whoever we're designing for. But in this way, it's studying those individual behaviors and in these contexts is. Yeah. And I also I want to echo what you're saying about Malcolm Gladwell, and not to take anything away from Simon Sinek or any of them, but
good for them.
Yeah, good for them. Yeah. But anytime I've heard these things almost from people outside of business, and they're like, have you heard of this whole thing about your why? And I'm like, really?
Because that's been the fundamentals of marketing. Seriously, even if you look back into the 19th century, if you go to the Coca-Cola Museum, the way they were marketing Coca-Cola at the time, it was centered on the why.
Of course. Of course. Okay. All right. So, you make the transition from academia into business, or as corporate prostitution, as you like to say. And
I'm going to have a horrible reputation after this. I don't think everybody will get the joke.
well, hopefully they do get the joke because it's quite funny. All right, and then let's talk a little bit about like the places that corporate life has taken you to. I know one of our values as a family, my husband and we now have an almost 7-year-old,
Nice.
is to see the world. And like, let's talk about it.
You know what? I have been very lucky because my first role in a serious corporate role was with CSA Group, which is headquartered in Toronto, Canada. It's a very global organization, and it's part of the TIC, which stands for Testing, Inspection, Certification Industry. Nobody knows about that industry, but let's see. I'm sure you see on your laptop, on your refrigerator, on all sorts of appliances, small marks like UL, ETL, CSA.
Oh, yeah.
What it means is that they are safe to be used in the market. There are standards. That industry, and I love that industry, actually rules the world, but nobody knows about it. Like your 7-year-old,
Yeah.
I'm sure is not dreaming of joining it. Like nobody even knows that
Right.
that industry. Like it's not like, oh, I want to be the astronaut.
Yeah, totally.
Nobody knows that industry exists, but it's one of the most lucrative, one of the most positive impact on humanity industries that's not even susceptible to any recessions, economic downturns, because it's regulation driven, it's regulatory compliance.
Sure.
And,
Wow.
and so it's a fascinating industry. So I've worked in 3 major organizations, started at CSA Group, moved to the most exciting at the time. And this is the thing about leadership. The leader at the time was the CEO was Wolfhard Hauser. His head of HR was Jonathan Lawrence. And at the time when I went there, I spent 6 years, had a major promotion. The company had over 27,000 plus employees and $3.5 billion in revenue.
Okay,
At
wow.
that size and scale, though, this is some things 20. Your vision is 2020, right? You look backward.
Always. Yep.
And the most visionary leadership in that they believed that to make an organization like that huge and more successful and growing, you have to run it like small entrepreneurial teams. So I'll tell you this, David, a lot of people may say that, very few can practice it or have tolerance for it. And Intertech of the era of Wolfhard Hauser actually did it, which is why I got to work with him on a number of projects, had tremendous global visibility. I recall I was crossing back into US from one of many trips, and the guy at Customs said, well, Jasmine, you're traveling an awful lot. I said, well, no, not really. He's like, you've left the country 35 times in 5 years.
Wow.
And that did not count flights from, I don't know, I'm giving real life examples, Italy to the Netherlands for work.
Right.
Or Taiwan, Dubai to Taiwan, all those examples. It did not count those things.
No, it's just.
So, and then it does not count inside the US to Canada.
Right.
So it was a very vibrant organization that believed in the power of humans, like to drive change. They knew how to drive change. They drove massive change. And I can tell you, the ETL mark, by the way, the ETL part was founded by Thomas Edison Electrical Testing Laboratories. They had acquired it. They kept the mark and they killed the division, by the way, and continued succeeding. So a few years ago, when we're doing renovations and had to buy a bunch of electrical products, every single one of them had the ETL mark. And it gave me such joy because when I was working there, when we would see a ETL mark on a single product, it would be celebration. But unbelievable story towards the end of my tenure. And again, I would have stayed there another 16 years. But I had to move, and my family's in Boston, could not move to London or Houston. Those were my options and choices.
Wow.
And they, towards the end of my tenure there, I would introduce myself in public meetings as the janitor, meaning if there was a problem, London would say, well, give it to Jasmine to figure out.
Oh, that's great. So small entrepreneurial teams, in practice, how did they do it?
Very easy. First of all, they hired 2 type. This is anybody in HR will say, "Oh, that's a terrible statistic," but I've heard Jonathan Lawrence and Wolfhard Hauser themselves talk about it out of their mouths in my presence. They said they 50% of new hires every year would leave the company within 6 months. 50%
Okay.
on their own. Part of it was because they were you had to be action oriented, you had to take initiative, you had to be change bound. For instance, in my own case, well, you're in Portland, Oregon. My first trip to Portland was 3 weeks after I was hired. I had to come like to an IEEE conference, which was in Portland, and by then at the downtown Hilton, I had to put together a forum of, like, Nordstrom was nearby too. They had
Oh
to
yeah.
put
Still,
together
it's still there.
yeah,
Nordstrom's still there.
so they're still there. I had to put together like a forum of EMC, which stands for Electromagnetic Compatibility Engineers from the industry. I was alone. We had no booth. I came back with 200 business cards of different people that I talked with at cocktail parties, whatever. And so this was very ultimate in one person, very, in a sense, very inexpensively. They had one of the best marketing organizations at 3.5 billion of revenue. They had 40 marketers globally and had staggeringly successful results. At another company, without naming it, which had 1.2 billion revenue, they had 395, and now it's more, marketers, and
Yeah.
all those people would trip over each other because half the time they had to coordinate what each one was doing because there was so much overlap. So Intertech was an amazing experience. It taught me how to operate in a very lean manner, but very effectively, to prioritize what really matters. And they put a stake and made a decision to go all digital at a time when not everybody was bought in. The year that they started doing it, 2006.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Very cool. Okay, so smaller teams, and did you in fact see 50% churn of new
Absolutely,
hires?
in the first
Wow.
year.
Oh
But
wow.
it was a very, how do I say this? It was a very valid thing because that was the culture. They were making no bones about it. When Kathy Cullen, the head of HR, the VP of HR at PTC, called me, PTC, Parametric Technology Corporation, they pioneered CAD, great company headquartered here in Boston. So the head of HR called me in saying, "Jasmine, I'm getting butchered." Employees would joke, also a very, very great leader, visionary leader, a lot of fast pace. Every wall had a poster that said accelerate when I joined. So PTC's employees would joke that the name of the company stood for prepare to change. So when the head of
Wow.
HR called me in, like, what do we do? Because I was leading digital, like web, I'm like, how do we change the perception? I'm like, don't change the perception. You have to actually own it. The company is moving fast. The
Yeah.
company is, you have to be change oriented. So you have to hire to the type, own it.
Yeah. That's true.
There's
Wow, very
nothing
true.
wrong with being change oriented. If that's your DNA, go with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be reporting fake numbers in essence.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas Jonathan Lawrence and Wolfhard Hauser were proud of those numbers.
Right. Right. I know I think about that in my own business. We're now a year in, and I think a lot about like the type of person that's going to be successful here. What kind of a firm do I want to build? But what's also interesting is like in the marketplace of marketing, like the craft of marketing, when digital came online, even slightly before the time frame you were talking about, 2006. I mean, even the first .com boom bust cycle.
Yeah.
2001,
2009.
Yeah, it was like late 90s, kind of into the early 2000s. That rate of change and having even digital come into the marketing world. I mean, I'm sure you remember the time where marketers used to place really big bets over longer time horizons and then just kind of see like where the chips fall, right?
And the campaign was a production, would
Totally.
last 6 months. They would
Well, yeah,
prepare something, roll it slowly out.
that's right. And then like digital comes along, and it was kind of a market, to me, a marketer's dream, but marketers of a certain era panicked, right? Like even I remember the days where, you had TV or cable, executives say like, no, 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 like on-demand TV is never going to happen. Like that's just not going to be a thing. I remember the days of people saying reality TV is just a fad. It's going to come and go. Like, and we all know how all of these things have kind of like come and stayed with us and persisted. But the beauty now of marketing is, well, the beauty when digital came in was like, oh, we have data. Like we have data to make really informed decisions. My brain's telling me, yeah, David, but like when you look at the Kamala Harris campaign, like they over-indexed on data
Yep.
and missed, a very large, piece of what was happening in the minds of the consumer or the voter, right? But, so what am I saying here? What I'm saying is now we have a state of marketing where we have data, but now we have the introduction of AI. And I don't know about how you're feeling, but the rate of change is actually increasing like real fast right now. And it's both exciting and like, I don't know, there's like a little bit of like, I'm still very excited about the future, but the pace of change and trying to manage that with clients is challenging.
I completely agree with you. I mean, the AI, first of all, AI has been around for a long time. It's just
This is
more
true.
available to
This
the
is true.
public,
This is
right?
true. Yes,
So
yes.
it's just more visible today to everyone. And again, it's like even with digital, to this day, not everybody's acing. Not everybody can show up at the top of Google search results.
That's right.
And that's one of the blessings of things that mandates that we achieved at Intratech that kind of honed my own personal skills to keep running. And now my own company, Strategy Arc, is competing with Gallup and others and showing up at the top of non-branded search results. That's huge.
Yep. Yep.
So those are very important things. And the other day I got excited. AI is now pulling me into the knowledge frame for Google, right?
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's
Great.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
All of that is exciting. What's changed, and I completely agree with you. What's really changing, though, I mean, we all have all these devices. We're all texting everybody. There is human expectation that everything is going to happen super fast. Yet certain things still require time. Like it's not like pressing send on email or pressing enter on text.
That's right. That's
And
right.
somehow marketers, frankly, have done a very lousy job articulating the value of marketers. Marketers are their own worst enemies. And
This
on
is
the other
true.
end of the spectrum, frankly, every single person who very often, not every single, but a lot of people with a keyboard think of themselves as marketers.
Well, no, this is very true. I am a consumer, therefore I am a marketer. My mentality and mindset I've seen persist throughout my entire career. Me coming out of the wealth management space, I would see time and time again financial advisors thinking, oh, I'm on the front lines talking to clients all day, every day. Therefore, I know how to market. And the answer is, yeah, sorry. People are educated in marketing, right? It's a craft, right? And a science. And there's a lot more to it than just, but we've also, consumers do experience things that marketers are creating, and they have exposure to them, and really good marketing creates an emotional response. And so when they have that emotional response to a marketing message or a piece of creative or whatever it might be, an experience, they then think how that affected them, and then they begin to think about how they can extrapolate their own experience onto another human being. And we all know as marketers like that you probably shouldn't engage in that kind of marketing because But they don't know that.
No kidding. And
Yeah.
but the funny part about today's kind of marketing environment is not only does everybody think they are a marketer, they also have magical expectations. And the
Mm.
other thing, sometimes they'll propose things and I'll turn around and say, as a consumer or as a B2B end user, when is the last time you've made a decision based on that? And then they step back. But good marketers, that was true 10 years ago, is true now, even more so now because there's this onslaught of technology, everybody claiming some new cool stuff. It's being able to discern and tell wheat from chaff.
Yes. 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 That's right.
Because what I see a lot on a lot of I work with a lot of different organizations. One of my clients is a big legal association, and worked with a big law firm, and we're collaborating with them, and they had to do like one LinkedIn post. This law firm that shall go unnamed had 60 marketers, I kid you not, some of them with law degrees. And the right hand never knew what the left one was doing. And then in the end, they ended up doing this. There was so much production and back end work. This is about a single LinkedIn post for which, by the way, we'd provided the full content.
Oh boy.
And then in the end, this bunch of geniuses ended up posting that on LinkedIn on a Friday at 3 p.m.
Oh, great.
You might as well not post it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that happens a lot.
So there's so much more that goes into good marketing. The other thing that I'm a huge believer in, like not you touched on it a little earlier. You said technology. Good marketers, it's not just like content. You have to be adept at knowing the other tech side of things. It's a really complex profession.
It is. It is. I'm so glad you bring that up because there's a part of my oh gosh. In earlier in my career, it was almost not valued. It felt as though the marketplace didn't value this in a marketer, but I've always been a tinkerer. Like I like to tinker. My son at 7 years old likes to go to, he's got a tinkering class where he has all of these things that he can kind of build. And like, actually there's this super cool thing that he made in tinkering the other day, which like sits now on my desk.
That
But
is
like
cool.
he
Oh,
was able
laser?
to, he was
That
able
is
to
so
make a
cool.
piece of art,
Yeah.
put it into a laser cutter, and then like the laser cutter scanned his image, and then he was able to put in the piece of wood, and he's like, oh yeah, Dad, look what I made for you, right? And as a marketer, I've
Good art
always
too.
seen technology as a way to build and tinker with things. And in marketing now, knowing and understanding technology, you have to have that knowledge. And if you don't have that knowledge, you're at a disadvantage. I would say about 50% of my time is solving technological challenges on the marketing side. And the rest of it is, whether it's execution or, creative or whatever those things are. But I would say about half of my time is really thinking strategically about marketing tech stack.
And to build on that, you also have to not just like jump at the flavor of the week or month idea, but strategically prioritize things you're going to like achieve and do well, and really focus on that and give it a little bit of time. Don't get me wrong. Do A/B testing, whatever. If something's not working, chuck it. But other things, I mean, marketing is not the art of being a magician and waving your wand. And
no,
it's about the accretive value of communicating, the value of your brand, creating interest, being relentlessly helpful to your clients. The other part with marketing is it's not just marketing alone. I see a lot of organizations where they bring in leads, business, but if you do not serve them well and you're hemorrhaging out the other end,
oh yeah,
you're completely affecting the brand. I had a situation where one of the verticals in a company that we shall not name, their inbound leads were up 50%, which is a spectacular metric.
Yep.
The sales leader, with whom I had a very good relationship, his sales were up 27%, also great metric.
Yep.
Revenue was up 0% in dollars. So, of course, the easy thing to say, oh, these are not, marketing's not doing a great job, sales not, but
Sure, sure.
you go deeper. So I went to the specific lab where this testing would take place for this type of devices. And guess what? In the morning around 9, 10 a.m., the lab was 90% idle. Around 2, 3 p.m., where it's supposed to be humming, it was busy only about 50, 60%. You talk with the lab manager and they say, well, the average test takes 6 hours. Employees are here at 9. We have a backlog. Now there's an operations issue.
Oh yeah.
Let's
Oh
resolve
yeah.
it. So then I went to finance to model, and and the lab manager did not feel personally empowered, though should have been, right, to approve overtime, saying it will be a hit on our revenue. Completely misplaced. So you have
Wow,
to go
wow,
to
wow, wow.
finance
Yep.
to model that overtime and prove. And I knew it actually would bring more money. You needed that. And what a bad experience it is for clients to get this in, think they have a sale, then be put in a long line to wait.
Oh yeah. That's terrible. Yeah,
That's, and then you know what? They have a bad experience, they'll remember it more
that's correct.
so than the good one.
That's right. I want to pivot a little bit. Talk to me about Jasmine, the person, not the marketer.
Um, I'm an intensely curious person. I told you early on that
Yeah.
I'm very interested in people. I don't think that people are a one size fits all approach. Actually, according to Gallup Strengths, individualization is my number 2 approach. You have to communicate with people, meet them where they are. You have to
Mm,
really understand them. And to me, that's really key to marketing.
mm.
I also, when I took my Gallup Strengths test years ago, it was like looking in the mirror. It was very eye opening and, in a way, life changing because it explained myself to myself way better. And so I became a Gallup certified strengths coach too, which has had a
Oh,
really good impact on my ability to build better marketing teams and to collaborate better with sales. So,
what was the biggest insight for you in that
for
experience?
instance, it's interesting. Like I'm a very positive person, but like I don't have positivity. Where positivity comes from is my third one is self-assurance. And that imbues me with the ability to take very calculated risks, assess situations, and walk into places that others might think crazy, but it's not. I can take a very long view of things
Yeah.
because I also have futuristic number 4. And
Okay.
and over the years, like I've learned, because I can see something, but it can be intimidating and overwhelming to somebody else. So
For
I've
sure.
learned to break it down into smaller pieces. So when you know yourself, you know how to better even serve your environment, serve your team.
Yeah.
And because I could say, if I see this happening in the future, it could be so intimidating and overwhelming. But if you portion it into smaller pieces,
Hmm.
that's a far more manageable situation. It's also saved me thousands of dollars over the years because I can walk into a property that is not staged and see what it would look like.
Very nice.
Most people, that's why staging is such big business, will
That's
not
right. They can't do it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
see that.
Wow.
So know thyself. And that's why when I also know my teams, for instance, say on my C-suite team, if there was a person who had input. So people who have input, think of them as information hoarders. They like to collect stuff. And then the other thing is they like to be relentlessly helpful by sharing information, which if you don't know they have that quality, that's their strengths, that's how they process the universe,
Yeah.
you'll think, oh, he or she doesn't trust me or doesn't think I'm doing a good job. But then I learned to like shower, almost drown that person in information, then their thing is satisfied for input.
Ah,
So when you know what that is, I've seen a lot of CEOs have something called restorative, which is think of it as fixers of broken things. And maybe that's the quality that's propelled them to become CEOs. So what these people do, you may like lay a gold egg. They'll say, "Oh, great job," and move on, right? They will not dwell. But if you know they're restorative, you know they're wired to constantly seek out broken things. Like their contentment comes from being able to fix things.
Where have you lived in the United States? Has Boston always been home?
Boston has pretty much always been home in the US, though I've traveled very extensively. I think I've been to most states except Utah and Alabama.
Oh, you haven't been to Utah?
No, it's on my list.
It's
I'm definitely going to both. So.
okay, very good, very good. And talk to me about you're talented with like speaking languages.
Oh, I love
English.
languages. I just absolutely love languages. Part of it comes from the desire to be understood and to understand
Oh,
others. So it goes back to probably that individualization.
wow.
And it's to me, I was born in Armenia. So Armenians have a saying about language that the more languages you know, the more times you're a human being. And there is absolute truth to that.
There's truth to that. Yeah.
Because then you can relate. It really, language opens up horizons and worldviews because other people look at it differently. Like if you think, for instance, in Spanish, to be born is like dar la luz, to give light. Think about that.
Wow.
It's a very different, profound meaning. I'm fortunate that I grew up in a family where education was like a religion. And so I grew up trilingual, which means when I speak English, I think in English. When I speak Armenian, I think in Armenian. And when I speak Russian, I think in Russian. And I know enough Spanish, German, French, and Italian. So when I'm in environments with those languages, I can order food, I can ask directions, I can go to a museum and understand. I'm sure I make tons of mistakes, like tons of. But you know what? That's the other thing. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. They
That's
know it's
right.
like my whatever language I'm speaking, I'm making an effort.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I um I took about 2 years of Mandarin
Oh,
as an
wow.
adult when I was living in San Francisco. And that experience, and it was like, I don't know, 3 nights after work for 2 hours. So it was a commitment. And it was a really interesting time for me because we were kind of anticipating the birth of our son. And I was like, okay, like we're going to be speaking Mandarin. We're going to be doing this, like, and as I was learning it, I was completely unprepared. Like when I was 19 years old, this is why I asked it. I, was laughing about Utah. I was born and raised a Mormon. So my
Were
first,
you? That
yes.
was so funny that I would say that.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like, oh, the one state you haven't been to. I was born and raised in upstate New York, but I like my first college experience was at Brigham Young University.
Nice.
And then when I was 19 years old, I was called on a mission to go to Fortaleza, Brazil. So like I had to learn
To speak
Portuguese.
Portuguese?
Yeah. Or
I
at the
only know,
time.
I only know muito obrigada.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And
Right. And for
pastel
me,
de nata.
well, yeah.
De nada.
That's and it like that was my first language. Well, so I took French in middle school, high school, but that wasn't enough. The education that I had was not enough to produce any real sort of fluency. Although it did help in learning Portuguese. But then where I was really studying, I mean, I was learning Portuguese to like study to live in an environment. But when I was studying Chinese, and I think it was what kicked it literally felt like somebody cracked my brain open. And not just my brain, it almost felt like there was I don't know, there was kind of it was a soulful experience as well that was hard to describe, where it was like, oh my goodness, even the way that they like the meaning of characters versus like an alphabet system, and having that experience and a lens through how billions of people actually like see the world is through this lens of their language versus like a Western system of like alphabet and like, what we have, um, really opened up my mind and my soul in ways um, that I was completely not expecting. Um,
You're right. It is almost like a spiritual experience.
yeah, yeah, because to me, spiritual experiences at their, well, for me anyway, at their root is about deep human connection, right? And so when you experience deep human connection, language is almost like a portal or a path into that. Um, if you approach it in the right way, right? So I love what
And
you say about language. Like it's this way. Actually, say it again. You said,
I, the Armenian saying is, you're a human being as many languages as you know.
yeah, yeah,
So let's say if you know you're three times the person. And
yeah,
it makes sense because it does like expand your horizons. And
sure,
see, that concept even just does not exist in English.
right, right, yeah, 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 yep. Oh my
Or
gosh, I love it.
the concept, I know in Portugal that made a big deal about it, is it saudade, the concept of missing someone, or
Mm,
saudade.
hmm.
Uh, it's the longing for someone, and like the same concept exists in Armenian, but the word to miss someone is very inadequate in English to convey that depth of longing and missing someone, a human being. It doesn't have the same strength of connotation.
Sure, sure.
And
Um, let's talk a little bit about your family history. You grew up in
sure.
Armenia. Tell us that story.
Well, both my parents were professors,
Okay.
very competitive. My dad, he wrote over 16 books by the time he passed away, unfortunately. My mom's an author of 40 books now.
Wow.
She is the first woman to be elected in humanities to the Armenian National Academy of Sciences. It's a big deal because it's a highly elective position, and she's very driven. She is
Sounds like
proof
it.
positive that you can be a successful professional and a mother at the same time. Like in the US, we very often have this undue discussion like, is a mother a good mother if she's not staying at home? Or a lot of women feel conflicted.
Sure.
And I had my mom's example, which was really inspirational. And not once did I feel that like I was not absolutely loved.
Mm,
So, and it gave me so much confidence. And the Armenian culture family is like very strong. So that's, and again, that's something I did not recognize, that it's not always the case. So, in many ways, when I went out into the world later, I came to the US to go to Wellesley. So, I did not realize how protected I was and sheltered. And I'm very grateful. But I thought, hey, everybody has a great family that loves them.
oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not the case. And that's an
Right.
absolute blessing. And you try
Yeah.
to do that in your life. And so I'm very grateful for my own family, for my husband. I got married very young. I had my daughter at 18, still thankfully married to the same guy, best decision of my life. And,
Awesome.
we had three conditions before marriage. One was that my education would continue unabated. The second was that I would be allowed to travel. The third was that
I love
it,
these. I love
it
these.
had to do with him. And thankfully, he kept up. He's usually been, with my career, everything I've achieved, without him, I would not have achieved, because he has been a rock, super smart guy, amazing human being, amazing dad. So all of that makes a difference. So the partner we seek out in life and are grateful to find,
Yeah.
that also has a huge impact on our life outcomes.
I agree.
And
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I could not do um what I do today without the
It's a
support.
journey, right? And
It is
so
a
who's
journey.
by your
Yeah.
side, who's cheering you on, who's really
Yeah.
happy for your success,
Yeah.
like all of that. One of my love of travel comes from the fact that my parents were professors, so they had 3 months available to them. And I had also a weird thing. They took me to school at the age of 6. The age was 7, but I really wanted to go to school, so they got special permission to place me in school. But I remember first day before going to school, my mom told me that I had to graduate with a gold medal, which was like you had to have straight A's.
Okay.
And I was supposed to only get A's. Now somebody might say it's terrible, but it actually gave me how do I say this, an impetus to find a way
Yeah.
creatively.
Yeah.
And later I asked her, like, why, but they did not enforce me. I was very average at piano playing, and I did not
Okay.
want to continue. They took me out of the music school.
Okay.
Later, when I asked my mom, she said, well, we knew academically you could do it. We knew you were not necessarily gifted for the piano. So
Well, she's honest.
So at
Okay,
least they
right? Like,
knew, right? They knew
yeah,
where to
yeah,
push, where to pull.
yeah.
But so it was lucky because so I would travel with parents, and then my childhood best friend, with whom I just came back from Norway with her, uh, we've known each other since first grade and have stayed friends. She now lives in Chicago. Um, her parents would take me with them, and then my parents would take her with us too. So it was like 3 months of summer travel. I have to admit, it took me a while to adjust to adulthood in like not traveling all the time until I figured out I could be in global roles where I could do that.
Wow. Oh, I love that. Um, and your daughter, you started traveling with her when she was young.
I started traveling with her, and she's right now, as we speak, she's in Spain. And her kids, too, have more stamps in their passports than most adults will, because they also take that's to me, travel is educational. It makes you more tolerant. It allows you to adjust to situations. It
Yeah.
allows you to just like really find a way because you're in unknown situations all the time.
Yep.
Quick story, my mom and I were in Hawaii, in Maui, doing the road to Hana.
Hmm.
And I kid you not, it's also a gastronomic journey. So we all of a sudden there was this barbecue smell that was amazing. We had to stop. It was probably one of the best pork whatever we have
Yeah.
tasted. So there were
Wow.
picnic tables. I mean, you're in the middle of nature. This is the road to Hana. My mom was waiting. I went to go get the pork, got the servings, really nice. So he serves it to you, of course, on banana leaves. Everything's natural. And then I said, well, where are the utensils? And he looks at me. He's like, you're on the road to Hana. Your fingers are your utensils. There are no utensils here. I'm like, and I did not think, I said, okay, thanks. And
Okay.
I
Yeah.
moved on. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden, a family from Michigan comes, and it was crowded. They said, "Could we please join your, picnic table?" And we're like, "Absolutely." And they said, "Well, you inspired us." I'm like, "How?" They said, "You were so nonchalant and easygoing when he told you there were no utensils, that made it easy on us."
Wow.
The lesson here is I did not feel I did anything special, but to
Right.
them it was special.
Yeah.
And so, but that open mindedness, like while in Rome, do as Romans do,
That's right. That's
that's a
right.
gift.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the things that we as a family feel strongly about is if there's a few gifts that we can give our son, it's one, the gift of travel while, you know, until he's an adult, right? Like while he's with us, um, we want to see all four corners of the earth with him, right? And we've been doing a decent job. He's been to Portugal. He's been to the south of France. We've been to
Yes.
Amsterdam. He like at Thanksgiving last year, he wanted to walk on the Great Wall of China. We did. Um, like we've been in Japan a fair amount. We do
Love all
love
those places.
we love Asia. I mean, I just had like kind of like, it feels like a food tour every time we're traveling in Asia. It just is pretty incredible. Um, in the beginning, for a young, well, thankfully we started traveling with him when he was very young. So let's call it, but it was also COVID. It was right after COVID. And the first place that we went that was outside of the country after COVID, I think, was Japan.
I
Yeah.
love Japan. It's transformational.
And it was amazing because like you could have a toddler just run around and you didn't have to worry about like, oh,
So
you're going to
safe.
be abducted or this or that, whatever. It was just so safe. And it was also a great way for him to see a society where people lined up for the subway train, right? Orderly. It wasn't just chaos, right? It was like, it was orderly chaos because there's a lot of people, still a lot of people, but it was organized. And there were like ways of being, like this is the expectation in our civilized society in Japan of how we treat each other. And I think that has had an impact on him. It certainly has had an impact on us. But yeah, that's one of those gifts. It's like the gift of education and the gift of travel. If
You
we
are
can do
so
those two things.
inspirational, and indeed, that's like the best thing you can do for your child. Warren Radke, he worked at Harvard Business School, was a minister as well, was CEO of Wright Associates. Once he said that, it stayed with me. He said, I never let school get in the way of my children's education. And he was saying that about the fact that he would always take his three kids out of school and take them to places traveling. Never let school get in the way of their education.
Actually, I love that quote. I love that quote.
So
I'm
as
actually going to
a
write it down in my
visionary
notebook
business
today.
leader, Warren Radke, like seriously, I was lucky to work at Wright Associates when he was the CEO. Brilliant guy. And that line just stayed with me. Never let school get in the way of education.
I love it.
Because very often we fall into those traps. And, you know, everything you're doing for your son, that's so inspirational and life-giving. The other thing I want to say, a lot of people will tell me, well, it's so expensive, we can't afford. They're expecting something phenomenal, but you like, it's also a value thing. Like I may really, you know, think 15 times over buying a tchotchke that's like $10, which is like nothing, right, in the grand scheme of things.
Sure.
And but it's the experiences that I value because people do not really, don't get me wrong, I love good things in life too, just like the next person. But you have to have the understanding of that things own us. Because if I buy that thing, now I have to make sure it's dusted, it's clean, where is it stored? It becomes, they own us. Experiences expand our lives. There's a lot of research about how when you travel, when you experience things, you actually live a longer life because when you're in the monotony, everything, your life, you squeeze more out of your life when you travel.
Okay, two things there. Experiences expand our lives. I love this. And two, our things own us. And I believe that those two things are absolutely true. I was just having a conversation with my younger brother, who's actually, today's his birthday. So happy birthday, Rob.
Happy birthday to him.
Yep. And he was saying, as I age, and he's not even that old, I think he's turning 45, but he's like, as I age, I want less stuff. I just don't want it. And I love that thinking. My husband, for example, is always looking for things that he can like get rid of. He's like, this needs to go, this needs to go, this needs to go. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, certainly even with a child, there's times where it's like, look at all this stuff. Oh my gosh, why? Right? Like,
and it's all relative, right? In a way, if sometimes some very underprivileged people in the US may have so much more stuff than other people in other countries, but those other people may be happier. I mean, let's talk about the fact that the US is the world's largest consumer of antidepressants.
yeah.
We have higher mortality rates when it comes to cardiovascular disease and a lot of, like, our society, we're so successful, we can do better.
Oh
And a
yeah.
lot of it comes to sometimes we're hoarding too much stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're stressing and competing in the wrong direction.
What are things that you mentioned, some things that you've learned from your parents, and that you've been passing those? It sounds to me like you've been passing that. It's a multi-generational cascade effect, is what I've heard. Um, but if you were to say, like, what are the top like 3 or 5 things that you learned from your parents?
I'm very grateful to my parents. I never had as a child growing up, in the US, it's unfortunate. And there was never a thing where, as a girl, I was not allowed to do something. That there was never that
Wonderful.
limitation. So when I came to Wellesley in the States and I was hearing a lot of women saying, oh, you can't speak up much, you can't do this, you can't do that, that sounded very alien to me. That was another thing I had to learn from my grandfather on, who was a very visionary leader, uh, who had a huge impact on my life because he would take me to a museum and spend maybe go into just one or two of the halls and explain every exhibit piece to me, take me to movies, art. Like it felt like I was my grandfather's special project.
Wow.
He spent an awful lot of time with me doing that. It was very educational. So the time we invest in our kids and how they get to view the world makes a difference. My dad would always had his favorite question is if you ever came huffing and puffing complaining about something, he would look at you and say, will the world stop revolving? Will somebody die? And that kind of to this day,
Yeah.
I ask that question. It gives you perspective. Sometimes we
Right.
overreact to things, right?
Yeah. Sure. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Eh, Like,
We're wired that way. Sure.
and why are we doing that? Like, you have to
Right.
understand what's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
My mom's absolute belief and trust in me, uh,
Mm.
absolute. That's very empowering.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of parents don't do that. The other thing that my parents did, and even some adults told them how wrong they were, they would encourage me to argue with them. Uh, my parents
Yeah.
literally encouraged me to argue with them to stand my ground. It's the best thing that parents can do. Whereas you can hear a lot of time people saying, oh, because I'm the parent, because I said so. First of all, it doesn't work.
Right.
In the corporate world also doesn't work for leadership. It's like leadership failure. But
Sure. Sure.
where is a child like your son? Where is your son going to learn to stand for his point, if not at home?
That's right. Oh, it's so interesting, these parallels. So I grew up in um, my early understanding of what community was certainly family unit, but then by extension was the Mormon community, right? Um, and it sound like our values, even though they're very different systems, seem, very, kind of similarly aligned, right?
Yeah.
Like I even look back on, I'm not a Mormon anymore, for example, but I do credit my upbringing and my parents, for that sense of belonging and community, that when you have that from a very young, early age, it's like a tree with deep roots, right? You get to have those deep roots that come with
Grounding.
you.
It's grounding, it's
Yeah.
community, it's connection. So when you think about it, it's so unfortunate that there have been so many wars in the world in the name of religion,
Mm.
because fundamentally, pretty much most religions teach the same values. It's just like different paths, but it also
Right.
creates that sense of belonging and community. It's just unfortunate some people just get in there and bastardize and use it for power. But
Sure, sure. So what does community mean to you? And has it changed over time?
um, I mean, one thing that, as you said, the commonalities, one thing that I've learned is people are so far more, people are pretty much the same anywhere you go. They want the same things for themselves, for their lives. The trouble is, some of them do not know how to go about it in the right way, right? So they may
Mm.
have most people have that fundamental goodness, it just doesn't come out in them. But if they knew themselves, which is why, again, I love Gallup strengths, because instead of focusing on weakness, it evolves into goodness. The same is true in the corporate world. We tear people down during performance reviews for no good reason, rather
Right.
than building them up to bring out the best. So people pretty much are the same. But community, I mean, again, proven in social psychology, for instance, people will prefer somebody from another race if the person believes with them. And unfortunately, sometimes that leads to tremendous polarization, where we start seeing only one perspective. So challenging yourself to look at things from different perspectives. I'm grateful my PhD is in law policy and society. So could have earned a law degree with 20% more coursework, but I never wanted to practice law.
Sure.
But one thing about legal reasoning that's really important, it kind of systematically teaches you to look at an issue from every single angle. And that's something that our education system has to teach us.
Yeah.
Every single, and a lot of people are missing out on that.
Sure.
I completely see the power of AI. I use it myself. One thing that I'm fearful about is that some people will just stop learning anything on their own and just rely.
I agree with that. I've also noticed, I don't know if you've noticed it as well, an increase like let's say you've known someone for a long time and you're communicating over email. I've noticed, because I use it myself, like if an email hits me a certain way and I'm like, ooh, maybe I'm a little emotional, I might give it to ChatGPT to help me out. Like, hey, tone this down a little bit, but this is what I want to communicate. And like, okay, it writes a better version. And I'm like, okay, I tweak it a little bit and I send it. But I've noticed with people that I've known for a while, sometimes our GPTs are talking to one another. And I've questioned whether we're losing the meaning, because like sometimes when we have an emotional response and then we think about it and then we respond in an email or whatever medium, you're still communicating. So for me, for example, I'll be just very transparent. If I'm irritated by something, some of my words are going to have a little bit of a sharper edge to them.
Of course, an email has no tone or inflection or emotion.
Right. But then I give it to GPT and it pulls all that. It makes it almost changes how I'm feeling. And so you're starting to miss meaning. And if that continues back and forth between
then
humans.
We've never articulated it in a way.
That's right. That's
intended to.
Totally.
Can I say something on that? Nothing should exchange email more than 3 times unless it's like such a mundane, you should pick up the phone and talk to someone, and we're losing that. When you speak with someone, it's so much easier to iron things out and ask. Instead of saying, first of all, very often ask. One of the questions I love asking in English, I'll say to someone, or they'll throw out a word, and I'll say, what does that really mean to you? What do you mean by that? And you'd be amazed, David, how often all these native speakers of English have very different interpretation of a certain meaning. And then you can diffuse a situation saying, when I say this, this is what I mean. Or when you say this, this is what I understand.
Wow, that's a great point. That is a great point.
And then that becomes a very different conversation. And you can actually turn a conflict into a very effective situation. Some of my best friends are people with whom I've had massive arguments up front.
Wow.
Because it also can build this unity if you can fight something out in a very constructive way.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, good couples are like that too, right? They know.
I agree. Yeah.
One thing that my husband and that I would recommend to everyone, don't argue over an issue. You can never agree on everything 1,000%.
Correct.
But make it issue-based. And then the other thing, it's again individualization. Figure out what it is that's really near and dear to that other person. So for me, it's travel. For him, it's music. He's into he's into jazz, classical. He's an audiophile. And he indulges me, I indulge him.
Yeah. Love it. I love
That's key. Like, it doesn't have to be the same thing. I had a neighbor who divorced her husband, who later because he wasn't always upbeat to go to every party she wanted to go to. God bless.
Yeah.
I'm not judging, but it's.
No, of course not. Wow, this has been wonderful.
Thank you, David. Likewise, meeting you has been an amazingly enriching experience.
Totally. Is there anything that you'd like to cover before we wrap?
I believe in strategic planning done differently. I believe in Gallup strengths. Try to understand people around you. Try to travel more. It opens up the eyes. I'm of the persuasion that when you hire people who love to travel, they'll problem solve better.
Okay. I got to travel even more.
Yeah, you have to. It's like the mandate. And then, take everything in stride. That's what I would say. Life is short. I'm so glad you're doing this because it's your passion. Sometimes we all bury our passions. Like I'm working on launching a travel-related website too. It's called Travel Chasing Art, because at one point I was on Delta Airlines pre-COVID, way pre-COVID. There was an article, top 35 museums of the world you have to visit. And like I've seen quite a few. I'm like, I'm going to make the list. And I did. So
that's awesome.
Own your own obsessions in the right way.
I like it. Wow.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you.
I've loved this. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Coded in Gold. I've been your host, David Newsom. Be sure to tune in next week to the season 1 finale of Coded in Gold. I'll be taking you through the theme that's been the undercurrent of this season: community. In the meantime, leave a like, comment, or share this episode. I love to hear your feedback, and I want to keep the conversation going. You can follow Coded in Gold on our socials for updates on upcoming episodes. Links are in the show notes. Thank you, and take good care.